I began competing over time for the city, then statewide, even regionally and nationally with the local YMCA and Amateur Athletic Union. I was in junior high school and I was finally good at something, and it was great. I felt worthwhile for the first time in my life, and it started showing up in other areas, in my grades and my willingness to participate in other activities and my confidence with people. I even finally lost weight thanks to the loving concern of my coach. My dad tried in his way. I'll give him credit for that, but it was my coach who finally broke through because he used some positive reinforcement. He suggested, he took me aside one day after a workout and said, "You're a good swimmer, Carol." I don't believe to that point I'd ever been told I was good at anything. And then he said, "You could be even better if you lost weight." That summer, I lost 30 pounds, and it continued to fall off. Now remember, I've broken every rule of health and fitness there is to break because you can get too much of a good thing. I became obsessive with being thin and compulsive about swimming, behavior that would eventually translate into the rest of my life and send me spinning out of control. I now know that real fitness isn't compulsive activity or anorexic eating habits. Real health and well-being comes from a life of balance. But for years, my love of swimming and running and ultimately even some triathlon competition was a real plus in my life. I competed in swimming through college and continue swimming with in the old ladies division now with the master's program. It was great physically, but it's also a great social outlet, hanging out with people who are fun and motivated and fitness-minded. When my interest in fitness even turned out to be a positive in my career because when I moved to San Diego, way back in 1981, I found myself in the middle of health and fitness nirvana. And I was actually assigned to cover the health beat at Channel 10. And that assignment lasted for 28 years. It was great because people are hungry for information that can help them take charge of their own health and fitness. And the more information you have, the more informed choices you can make. Now, I think medical science has come up with some fairly consistent guidelines over the years. We've heard a lot of them repeated here this evening, unless you've been living in a cave. I think we all pretty much know about the importance of moderate regular exercise, right? No smoking, easy on the booze and junk food, eat foods in their whole form. You know the drill. Does anyone really need to hear this again? No, I don't think so. That's important though, but that said, there's more to our health and well-being than exercise and good food. Physical fitness is great, but it's not enough for total health. I should have paid attention to my own reports. You know, back in the 80s, the health experts began seriously looking into the link between stress and physical illness. They called it the mind-body connection, a concept that for years had been relegated to those alternative, holistic, new age, wacko health nuts, is now widely accepted by mainstream medicine. And while I reported on all the new findings about the relationship between emotional and physical health, it never once occurred to me that I could be a candidate for stress-related health problems. Over a period of months, I ignored the worsening symptoms of what was clearly the beginning of a breakdown. It made absolutely no sense at the time. Things were going great. My career was on the upswing. I was anchoring 3 newscasts a day, Monday through Friday, making speeches and public appearances nearly every day of the week, church groups, service organizations, charity fundraising events, and of course, doing my nightly segment on health and fitness. I was newly married, and truthfully, I look back over that time period and it's a blur. I began taking on more than was reasonable, accepting more outside invitations than I could even keep track of, trying my best to meet what I perceived to be everybody else's expectations of me, unable to say no, to set boundaries, or heaven forbid, disappoint anyone in any way. But you don't have to be an overachiever to have stress-related health problems because stress manifests itself in many ways, yes, through overwork, but often it comes through a lack of purpose or conflict and pent-up bitterness, anger, hostility, unresolved emotions that just fester inside of you. You ignore the stress and it will demand your attention through health problems. Have you ever heard that bumper sticker definition for stress? I had it on my desk for years. Stress is what happens when your gut says no, but your mouth says, why, yes, I'd love to. But I was afraid to admit I could be burning out, afraid I couldn't handle it, afraid someone might find out I'm only human. I began having trouble concentrating. Even the smallest task became overwhelming. I became dizzy and fatigued and developed flu-like symptoms that lasted for months, lost patches of hair, developed chest pain and tightness, shortness of breath. By the time I finally gave up and my husband very nearly carried me to the doctor, I thought life as I knew it was over. But the doctor smiled at me, and he said what I was suffering from had a name. He said, "You have extreme anxiety, probably due to a chronic clinical depression." So following a short-term program of medication, which in the interest of full disclosure over the years became a lifelong deal, which I look forward to every day, but at that point I began a longer-term program of counseling to figure out how in the world I'd ever gotten to this point in the first place. And what I learned was life-changing. I had never believed in all that psychobabble stuff. I'm from Iowa. We're stoics in the Midwest. We don't talk about our feelings. Frankly, nobody wants to hear about them. But you know, as I began to uncover feelings and resolve conflict that I never even knew was there, I began to feel better. And then I curbed my schedule by first identifying my motivation for everything I got involved with. And for you overachievers out there, or overdoers, this is a great little test for you. Before you say yes to anything, ask yourself 3 questions. Why am I saying yes? To look good, to keep up with someone else, for fear someone will think less of me? Number 2, is this the best use of my time? Am I the right person for the job, or is someone just trying to fill a slot? Number 3, by saying yes, am I shortchanging other commitments and ultimately doing none of it well? And what's the point of that? And as I began to employ these strategies, my strength returned, my anxiety subsided, and most importantly, I got back my joy. Now, this certainly doesn't mean we all become narcissistic, self-serving dolts, because that's a life with no meaning too, and we all know about the health benefits of giving back and volunteering. But in this context, I can tell you now, I'm a little more selective. I may not be able to say no to a boss or a family obligation or a friend in need. I don't even want to have to say no to those things. But I do have a vote with the guy on the other end of the phone line from the Sunrise Rotary Club in Fallbrook who needs a speaker at 7 a.m. Now, at the time I got that phone call, I was working the night shift at Channel 10, got off work at midnight, drove home to almost Alpine, is where I lived at the time. And there, if you do the math, in order to get to Fallbrook for a 7 o'clock meeting, I was going to have to get up at about 4:30 or 5. Well, you do the math, how much sleep did I get? You know, I said yes to that man's invitation because I didn't want him to think I wasn't a nice person or didn't want to share my time and talents. And so I put everyone's life in danger on the freeway, including my own, made a crappy talk, then came back and had to work an entire work shift and did that badly as well until midnight the next night. Now that's just flat stupid. That's just stupid. You don't need to say yes to everything just to look good. What you need to do is give a guy a suggestion for some other speakers and thank him kindly. So that took a little bit of doing to learn. All of this means too, ladies especially, men, hold your ears here. We can't be comparing ourselves with other people whose strengths, talents, and capacities may be different than ours. In all honesty, the women's movement, for all it accomplished, did not help women in this area. Do you remember what they told us, those of you who are old enough, when this whole thing got going? They told us we could have it all without telling us we'd also have to do it all. An impossible standard which led millions of women to a condition known as the superwoman syndrome. And then to be whole people, ladies and gentlemen, we can't ignore our spiritual sides. I tried to do that, but you risk going through life, maybe even achieving everything you thought you wanted and feel empty inside. In my late 20s, I got a wake-up call. My mother died. She took her own life. I come by my depression, honestly, and it forced me to begin a personal search for truth. And through a several years-long process of asking questions and meeting people whose faith was real, reading the Bible, and even going back to church, I found some answers in Christianity. I looked honestly at the claims and determined they were true. Now, whether you come to the same conclusion or not isn't important here because faith issues are very personal. But I can tell you there's good secular science which supports how a God consciousness can fill some serious voids in our life. And it's been my observation that people of faith get through life's twists and turns without as much wear and tear. And the final step into my better health and well-being was actually the toughest for me. I've had to take a hard look at my relationships and realize that I can't go it alone. I'm a slow learner, but over the years I've let a few people into my world, and now I have this tiny network of family and friends who really know me and care about me. So here it is, folks. The relational, the spiritual, mental and emotional, and the physical, all integral parts of our being that must be nurtured if we're going to be what? The most effective, productive, joy-filled people possible. It is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Thanks so much. Have a great evening.